Welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today we're going to jump into an explainer on John Piper's introduction to his big work on divine providence, what he calls God's purposeful sovereignty.
All right, so let's kick things off with a question that might actually catch you off guard. Is the word providence even in the Bible?
The short answer, nope, it's not in there. And that, right away, creates a little bit of a puzzle we've got to solve.
And this slide really helps put it in perspective. You see, providence is a lot like other big theological words we use all the time, like Trinity. The word itself isn't there, but the reality it describes, oh yeah, that's all over the place, woven through tons of different texts and stories.
Okay, so if the word itself isn't in the Bible, what exactly is this biblical reality we're trying to get at? Well, Piper's book gives us a really solid, concise definition to work with.
You see the key words there? Purposeful sovereignty. That's everything. If you want to understand what God is doing, the nature of his control and just how far it goes, you have to start with his goal. What's the end game?
And Piper uses this great analogy to make the point. It's so good. I mean, think about it. If you just see someone digging a gigantic hole in the ground, you might think, what on earth are they doing? It looks like pure destruction. But the moment you find out their goal is to build a house with a basement, which you totally need in Minnesota, it all clicks. The goal makes the process make sense.
Right. But this is also where it gets tricky for us. Because once you accept God's purposeful sovereignty, it kind of forces you to confront what Piper calls counterintuitive wonders.
And this passage from Zechariah is a perfect example. I mean, it is jarring. God straight up says, I am raising up this worthless, cruel shepherd. And then, almost in the same breath, he says, woe to my worthless shepherd, and pronounces judgment on him.
So what do we do with that? I mean, how do we make sense of it? The really big point here is that our first emotional reaction, our gut feeling, doesn't get to define what's real. The Bible itself has to give us the framework for how to think about these really hard passages.
And that's where this passage from Isaiah is just so helpful. God says it plain as day, my thoughts are not your thoughts. We're actually called by Scripture to have our minds renewed, to build new mental categories that line up with how God has revealed himself, not with what feels comfortable to us.
So, to help us get there, to develop this new way of seeing, the book lays out a really helpful framework. It's 4 invitations, basically.
And you can think of these as steps for shifting your whole perspective. First, you just have to accept that God's ways can seem strange to us. Second, you have to push through the words on the page to get to the reality behind them. And when you do that, you start to enter what he calls a God-entranced world, where you see his hands-on presence in everything.
Man, that quote from the poet Gerard Manley Hopkins just nails that third invitation, doesn't it? The world is charged with the grandeur of God. That's the idea. We're not living in a world with some absentee landlord God. No, he's actively involved in everything, right down to feeding the birds and making sure the lilies are clothed.
Okay, so let's get practical. Why does any of this matter for our actual daily lives? What's the payoff? Well, the Apostle Paul tells us that all Scripture is profitable, and believe me, this truth is no exception.
See, getting a handle on God's purposeful sovereignty is so much more than just a heady theological exercise. It has real-world consequences. It changes how we see ourselves, how we worship, and even how we walk through suffering. It puts steel in your spine and ballast in your boat, as the slide says.
Yeah, it really is about moving from something that feels like abstract theology to something that is concrete hope. The whole point of this doctrine is to show us a huge God, to lift up his unstoppable grace, and to set his people free.
So we'll leave you with that question to chew on. As you go about your day, what's one ordinary thing you can look at and see as part of this God-entranced world? Thanks for joining us for this explainer from Reformed Thinking.